I did something my family still doesn't know about. Something that, if they ever found out, would shatter every illusion they've built about me being the quiet one. You see, I moved my grandmother's $800,000 estate into a protected trust. Every cent, every deed, locked away under layers of legal firewalls they couldn't touch. Not that they'd suspect I'd even think to do it. And I didn't. Not yet. The stakes were simple. One slip, one brag, and everything I'd painstakingly safeguarded could evaporate. The irony is delicious. The people who think they own me, my life, my inheritance, have no idea that the real power has been in my hands the whole time. My name is Victoria. I'm 32. I'm also the one everyone quietly underestimates. The shy daughter, the niece who never causes trouble. The granddaughter who listens, nods, and smiles. People assume I don't fight back. They assume I'll take whatever comes my way. They assume wrong that I've spent my life in the background, the observer, the quiet anchor, the one who cleans up emotional debris without leaving fingerprints. It's exhausting being underestimated, but it's also an advantage I've learned to exploit. You'll see soon why it matters. It all began with my grandmother's passing. She left me her beach house and a modest savings account, simple enough on paper, but layered with emotion. At her funeral, I watched my brother and my mother smile tight smiles, offering fake condolences that barely hid their hunger. That's when I remembered my grandmother's words, spoken softly during her last week with me. Money changes people, Victoria. Especially the ones who share your last name. I felt her warning in my chest, heavy and precise. Like a compass pointing straight to the storm I didn't yet know I'd have to weather. I didn't panic. I didn't announce anything. I went to my lawyer, set up trusts, layered protective clauses, and built a wall of legal concrete around what was mine. I created the kind of security you can't just argue away, and I watched. Waited. I didn't brag. I didn't post anything online. I let time do the heavy lifting. The waiting game was the hardest part. Every day felt like tiptoeing through a room full of fragile glass, but I had a plan, and I wasn't about to let anyone break it. Then last week the knock came. My brother and mother, dressed like they were going to brunch instead of trying to ambush me, stepped inside. His smug grin, the one he always wears when he thinks he's already won, was plastered across his face. They acted like they owned my home, like I was a visitor in my own life, that a stack of papers thumped onto the coffee table. My brother laughed, claiming the house was legally his. His ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine. You have until Friday to pack up your life and get out. I felt the old hurt rise, familiar and sharp. Then something clicked. My chest tightened, my jaw set, and I leaned back, letting a slow, deliberate smile creep across my face. You really think I'd let that happen? I said it softly, almost to myself. But I knew they heard. The power had shifted, and for the first time they would realize I wasn't the quiet one anymore. And now I have to ask you, where are you watching this from? What time is it for you right now? Because no matter where you are, this story is about to prove something. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything. The room shifted like the air had just changed temperature. 1 second it felt normal. The next, every breath seemed heavier, thicker, loaded with expectation. My brother didn't back down. Not yet. He leaned against the wall with that same arrogant slouch, the one I'd spent decades silently observing, memorizing. It was the same posture he had in high school after I covered for him when he totaled the family car, or when I found him trying to take cash from my wallet at 18. History has a funny way of repeating itself, especially when people think no one's paying attention. He dropped the papers on the coffee table again, letting them slide, as if letting gravity validate his claim. This is just practical, he said, his voice almost conversational. You can't handle all this. I raised an eyebrow but stayed still. I already knew the exact scenario, down to the forged signature at the bottom. The shaky version of my name was scribbled, all jagged angles and uncertain loops, a poor imitation of the real thing. He puffed his chest, justifying it as taking what's fair. As he spoke, I remembered the diner days, the small amounts of tips he borrowed from me, claiming he'd pay back. The mental gymnastics hadn't changed, they just scaled up. And Mom, he added, glancing over his shoulder with a smug grin. We talked to a lawyer. It's already done. Her voice joined in, soft but sharp, a delicate blade hidden in sugar. Victoria, for your own good. You're too emotional about this house. It's just a property. Grandma would have wanted the family to share. I bit the inside of my cheek. The hypocrisy was almost comical. This was the same mother who barely saw Grandma in the last 2 years, off chasing some new man, leaving me to hold her hand when she needed it. Classic gaslighting, twisting facts until reality bent in their favor, hoping I'd crumble first, but I didn't crumble. Not this time. I flashed back to the nights I had rehearsed this confrontation over and over. Nightmares and quiet what-if scenarios, every possible manipulation plotted in my mind. Old Victoria would have cried, begged, maybe even given in. New Victoria had a checklist. Multiple meetings with my lawyer, every conversation with the estate attorney recorded, assets locked in a trust that not even a minor slip could breach. Every what-if had been anticipated. I let my eyes drift to the forged papers again. Which lawyer did you use? I asked calmly, why mother's hand fluttered over her purse strap, a quick flash of panic crossing her features. Some friend of a friend, she said, voice tight. Why brother's smug grin faltered as the lies began stacking on top of each other like a wobbly house of cards. I could see him calculating, imagining some bribed, sketchy notary notarizing the forgery in secret. Every detail, every overconfidence, was unraveling before me. Then I dropped the bomb. My voice was soft, deliberate. Funny, the estate attorney called me yesterday. Asked if anyone had approached her about this. Did either of you? Their reactions were instant. My brother's grin faded into a twitch of panic. My mother's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, knuckles white. Suddenly, I wasn't the quiet one they could push around. I was a problem they hadn't calculated right. I leaned back, letting the tension hang. And then I asked them something I knew would make them squirm. If you were standing in my shoes, what would you do? Blow everything up on the spot or play along? Give them just enough rope to hang themselves? The room was silent for a moment. I could see the gears turning in both of their heads, imagining consequences they hadn't considered. For the first time in years, they were on the defensive, and I was firmly in control. Why revenge didn't start when they showed up with those fake papers. It started months earlier, long before the knock at the door. Long before the smug grins and the forged signature. I remember lying awake at night, imagining bulldozers tearing down the house while my family took selfies in the front yard, laughing like it was all a game. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. Stop hoping these people would change. And I had hoped, foolishly, that grief might soften them. But grief didn't soften them. It sharpened their edges. Every smile they gave felt like a blade. That's when I realized, if I wanted justice, I'd have to engineer it myself. The first attorney meeting was almost ritualistic. My hands shook as I signed the trust papers, the pen gliding over the documents like it carried the weight of my entire childhood. I asked the question that haunted me. Does outside interference include my own family? The attorney didn't hesitate. It includes anyone who is not you. That simple confirmation, delivered with professional calm, was the first validation of the fears I'd carried for years. The wall of legal protection I had imagined was real and enforceable. Next came documentation. I started writing everything down, every comment, every joke, every undermining action. My mother would say, "How big is the place for just one person?" while my brother chimed in with a grin. "Finally, we can host real parties once the house is ours." I pretended to be overwhelmed, downplaying the estate's value while repeatedly meeting with my lawyer to discuss safeguards. I asked about forgery scenarios, about pressure and duress, about ways to challenge fraudulent deeds. I studied criminal charges and case files, filing away every worst-case scenario as fuel for the day I would need it. Every meticulous note, every recording, every consultation became part of my arsenal. Walking through the house at night, memories came rushing back. The summer nights on the porch, Grandma teaching me to cook in the tiny kitchen, stories of starting with nothing and building a life from scratch. I had internal arguments with myself, wanting to believe my mother might somehow choose me. But deep down, I already knew she never had before. This wasn't just a game of revenge. It was a test of emotional endurance, a balancing act between anger and memory, between loss and legacy. It wasn't just about the house. My brother broke things with a careless flick. "Stop being dramatic," he'd say. My straight A's were ignored. My mother boasted about jobs my brother had quit. Trusting myself for the first time in my life, trusting that my judgment, my preparation, and my instincts were enough, felt revolutionary. For once, I wasn't bending to the whims of their entitlement. I was choosing me to be. By the time the confrontation rolled around, I had rehearsed the possibilities in detail. Charm, guilt, anger, threats. I anticipated every tactic. There was a fleeting temptation to give one last chance, to hope for some miracle of familial conscience, but I knew the outcome. I had made a decision. Collect evidence instead of arguments, proof instead of protests. I played weak. I told them I'd think about it. I claimed I was overwhelmed, needing time to process. My brother smirked, convinced I was crumbling. My mother relaxed, relieved that I might cave. They believed it. Let them. Every feigned hesitation, every carefully timed sigh was strategic, an illusion designed to bait them into overconfidence. After they left, I went through everything they dropped. Photographs of every page, every forged signature, every fake notarization, every inconsistent date. I sent a simple email to my attorney. "You were right. It's happening." Months of preparation were finally paying off. And then, I sat alone in that house, reflecting. Have you ever sat alone in your home and realized the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you now have to protect yourself from? And that realization, heavy and isolating, was the first step toward the kind of empowerment that doesn't just fix injustice. It rewrites it entirely. The days leading up to it felt like a countdown to some quiet war. Every morning I woke, the weight of what was coming settled on my chest. I decided to invite them to a stage where there would be witnesses, records, and no room for improvisation. A text message, carefully worded in the language that always triggered their guilt, went out. To my quiet surprise, they agreed. So fast it was almost insulting. They thought I was calling them to surrender. They had no idea I was calling them to a trap. With my lawyer, I mapped everything out like a battle plan. Every possible escalation, every legal angle was documented. The meeting itself, then the potential lawsuit for fraud. We discussed elder financial abuse. Grandma had been physically frail near the end of her life, and their conversations with her hadn't been as innocent as they liked to pretend. Each detail was evidence. Each lie a thread we would pull. It didn't take long to uncover the deeper motivation. My brother, Jake, had been gambling heavily. Maxed out credit cards, shady loan messages left open on my laptop. They were all breadcrumbs leading to the truth. He forgot to log out of his accounts, and my mother, Sarah, had co-signed some of his debts. Both of them would be in serious trouble if their schemes were exposed. Suddenly, the family versus family narrative dissolved. It wasn't about fairness or inheritance. It was about plugging holes in a sinking ship. Jake tried to intimidate me even before the meeting. A text disguised as a joke landed on my phone. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Vic. You know you can't fight us." I restrained myself, replying only, "We'll talk at the house." Everything would be on record when it counted. Still, doubt crept in. Fear crawled up my spine as I looked at family photos Grandma had kept on the walls. Would she be proud or heartbroken at how far her children had fallen? I practiced in front of the mirror, rehearsing clean, controlled sentences instead of emotional rants. Statements that a judge, jury, or camera could understand. That worst-case scenarios played over in my mind. Them screaming, threatening, maybe even lunging at me. I also imagined them backing down. But that one felt less real every time. I prepared for both possibilities, knowing the stakes were genuine. Final preparation was meticulous. My lawyer instructed me to record everything. I set my phone up to look casual, plugged in like any other device. Cameras were perfectly positioned. Printed copies of the trust documents, the original will, and email trails were ready in a folder on the kitchen counter. Within reach. I wasn't just planning to survive that meeting. I was planning to turn it into Exhibit A. When they arrived, Jake and Sarah walked into the beach house like actors stepping onto a stage. Jake wore his best shirt. Sarah plastered on that brittle smile she used when she wanted to look like the reasonable adult. They sat without waiting for me to offer a seat, as if hierarchy still belonged to them. Jake's opening move was classic. He feigned concern about my stress, saying it made more sense for him to manage the property. He's better with business, and I'm more emotional, he claimed. Sarah added that I could stay with her until I got back on my feet, as if homelessness were just a temporary inconvenience. Peak gaslighting. I let them talk, nodding at the right places, asking small questions to keep them going. Every word, every smirk, every manipulative phrase was slipping neatly into my audio recording, the little invisible witness perched on the side table. Then Jake pushed the forged papers again, telling me to handle this privately without dragging outsiders into family matters. That was my moment. I took a deep breath, walked to the counter, and returned with my folder. Laying it down next to his, I said calmly, "I had something I wanted to share too." Jake rolled his eyes. Sarah looked uneasy. The ground beneath them was shifting. I opened the folder and spread out the documents. A certified copy of Grandma's will, the trust papers, and a letter from my attorney dated before their scheme even began. I explained the irrevocable trust structure, my status as sole trustee and beneficiary, and that any attempt at transfer could be considered fraud. Jake laughed, but his eyes darted over the official stamps, the realization hitting that this wasn't just something I had printed off the internet. Then I laid out the evidence. Photographs of his forged deed, the fake notary stamp, conflicting dates. I spread them like cards at a poker table. My lawyer already had copies. I calmly explained that if they continued, we would not be keeping this in the family. The trap had been sprung, every move anticipated, every lie exposed. Sarah's face went pale the moment I laid out the folder. She turned on Jake instantly, snapping his name like a whip, demanding to know what he had done and how he could be so stupid. They forgot I was even in the room, arguing as if their betrayal of me was just a bad business decision. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and grief. Satisfaction that their hubris was crumbling, grief that this had been my family all along. Jake's voice shook as he made a last desperate attempt. He begged, claiming he was in trouble, pleading that he just needed a little help, and that the paperwork could be fixed without anyone finding out. Sarah's guilt tactics followed immediately, accusing him of tearing the family apart, questioning if he was really willing to choose a house over his own blood. It was a pitiful performance, the arrogance of months giving way to vulnerability. I didn't flinch. "I'm not choosing a house over you," I said firmly. "I'm choosing boundaries over being used. I will not sign anything. I'm already protecting myself legally. If either of you moves forward, I will file charges." Clear, controlled, unassailable. The power was no longer theirs to wield, Jake snapped. His face twisted as he confessed to a fatal mistake. He had already used the forged document as collateral with someone who wasn't exactly patient about getting paid back. My skin went cold. The depths of his recklessness and betrayal, dragging Grandma's legacy into danger, became fully real. Every confession became another reason we were headed to court. The courtroom was fluorescent, smelled faintly of stale coffee, and felt impossibly official. What had been messy private family drama was now a case with a case number. I felt both exposed and strangely powerful as my lawyer handled most of the speaking. My heartbeat was loud in my own ears but steady, each beat a reminder that I had prepared for this. Their desperation was tangible. Jake couldn't stop bouncing his leg. Sarah's knuckles were white from gripping her purse. Their lawyer whispered, offering comfort that wasn't really there. They looked human in a way I hadn't seen before. Anxiety stripped of pretense. The judge reviewed the evidence with clinical precision. Original will, trust documents, timeline of interactions, then the forged deed, fake notary stamps, mismatched dates. It was almost surreal, seeing my family's lies laid out so methodically. Stripped of the emotional manipulation that had always made them so effective, their power evaporated in the room's sterile light. When it was my turn, I testified simply. I told the story of Grandma's decisions, her conversations about responsibility, and my observations after her funeral. I named Jake without anger, like reading from a script, and somehow, that calm delivery was more impactful than any scream or accusation could have been. Then the recording played. Jake's voice, confident at first, then shaky, filled the courtroom as my attorney cued it. Hearing their manipulations again, the forged papers, the talk of privacy, made it impossible for anyone to claim ignorance. The judge's face tightened. The clerk kept glancing up from notes, absorbing the undeniable proof. The defense tried to spin the story. Desperate financial choices, ignorance of details, intentions to be fair to both children. My lawyer pointed to the texts, the timelines, the inconsistencies. Each lie crumbled under scrutiny. Finally, the judge turned to me and asked how it felt to rule against family. I hesitated, aware my words would be immortalized in the transcript. It felt like ripping out a piece of myself, I admitted. But letting them win would have erased everything Grandma fought for, everything I've learned about my own worth. I'm not here to punish them. I'm here to draw a line that should have been drawn years ago. The ruling was measured, unemotional, but it landed like a door closing on one version of my life and opening another. The will and trust were upheld. The forged deed was invalidated, and fraudulent documents were referred for criminal investigation. The house and money felt less like a prize and more like a shield. Jake's face went red, then gray. Sarah looked as if the ground had been pulled from under her. Their lawyer muttered about appeals, but I didn't care. The main battle was won. I left the courthouse with my attorney, folder under my arm, feeling a strange mix of triumph and grief. My legacy was protected, my future secured. But whatever illusion I had left that my family would someday choose me was gone. The victory was bittersweet, a shield I had earned at the cost of hope I'd once clung to. Jake's downfall followed quickly. His debts caught up with him. The house he'd bragged about was out of reach, and the people he owed weren't the kind you want to disappoint. He lost his job when his boss discovered the investigation. Stress had sent him into a deeper spiral, and I knew he was finally facing the consequences of his arrogance. Sarah, once flitting from relationship to relationship, suddenly found herself alone more often. Not everyone wants to be associated with someone whose name appears in court records. Isolation, it seemed, was her only inheritance. A year later, on a cold, windy evening at the beach house, I saw Jake outside a rundown bar. Shoulders hunched, eyes briefly meeting mine. A flicker of recognition, shame, or maybe resentment passed between us. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. He had made his choices. I had made mine. Driving back, unloading groceries, I sat on the porch listening to the waves. The walls still held Grandma's pictures, recipes, stories. Now they also held proof that I could stand up for myself, even when those I stood up to shared my blood. Sometimes I still ask myself if it was worth it. If keeping the house and money justified losing whatever fragile, broken version of family I had left. But I remember the girl I used to be, the one expected to sacrifice. I couldn't go back to that, not even for peace built on being small. I honor Grandma by protecting her legacy, refusing to let it be a bandage for someone else's mistakes. I'll leave you with this question because I still wrestle with it myself. If you had to choose between protecting your future and keeping a family that only shows up when there's something to take, which loss could you live with? Finally, thank you very much for watching, but please subscribe, leave comments, and see you with the next story.